So hello everyone, and a warm welcome to this EVASys webinar on Next Generation Managed Services. My name is Chris Gomez and I'm an account director here at EVASys covering the UK and Ireland. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Kathy Gallagher, who is the VP of Industry Programs in the United States. Kathy and I focus on helping Oracle Cloud application customers get the most out of their investment by using technology and services to enhance the overall experience to ultimately get a greater ROI from their Oracle Cloud applications. We're really happy for you to have joined us today to cover this interesting topic of next generation managed services. What are they and why do you need them? Looking at the list of guests that have joined us today, there are people from all over the world, which is fantastic to see. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And I've got no doubt that each of you are at different stages in your Oracle journey. Some of you have not yet bought the solution, whilst others, I understand, have been live for some months now. And we hope that each of you get the most out of this session today, but bear with us when we cover points that may not apply to you based on where you are in that journey. So by means of an agenda, Kathy and I would like to talk to you about the following. So firstly, setting the scene, we want to spend some time reminding ourselves of the questions that we set out to answer in this webinar today and aligning ourselves to the typical journey that we see many of our customers following post their implementation of Oracle Cloud applications. We'll then move on to talk about continuous improvements, and this will help us with answering two of those questions that we set out to answer today. And then we'll go on to talk about how we can leverage innovations to answer a further three questions in our list. And throughout these sessions, we'll be really interested to hear from you on some of these topics. So what we've done is we've put together some poll questions to help us with gauging where you are in your Oracle journey. Now, the webinar today is scheduled for around 40 minutes, and Kathy and I hope to leave some time at the end to answer any questions that you may have for us. You'll see on your screens in front of you that you've got an option to ask questions. So please do ask as we go, and we'll look to answer as many of these questions during the session as we can. But if we do run out of time at the end, don't worry, we will follow up with each of you and answer any questions post the event that remain unanswered. Okay, so let's go ahead by starting with the setting of the scene. So I referred earlier to the list of questions that we used as part of the positioning this webinar. So let's use this slide as a reminder of the questions that we included in that invitation, because no doubt it's what interested you in joining us today. So that's what our focus is going to be. And when we look at these questions, they are all pretty much yes/no questions. So if you did answer no to any of these, we want you to leave us today with a clear view of how you can turn those no's into a yes. So are you meeting and exceeding those return on investment criteria that you intended with your cloud technology investment? Are you able to continuously drive user adoption? Do you benefit from a fully automated testing solution for your quarterly updates? Do you have time to assess and deploy those innovations that your business can benefit through the enabling functionalities? And does your support model allow you to help with delivering on your KPIs? So Kathy, let me pose a question to you and bring you into this discussion. We often look at the journey taken to replace software in an organization, be it ERP, HCM, CRM, or all three, and have the start of the journey as a procurement phase where we set out the requirements, detailing our mandatory requirements along with our nice to haves, for example. And then we choose the supplier or suppliers and we implement the solution before going live. Is that the end of the journey?
That's a great question, Chris, but it's not the only question we all have about the journey. Here's a couple more. So as you said, is it the end or the beginning when you go live? When you talk about managed services, is that about hardware or does it include software? And then, what do you do about all these upgrades that come? Who does the testing? How long does it take? And how do you even get to the great features that come with Oracle's innovation releases and implement them? And then what do you do about user adoption and change management? Is everyone bought into the system? How do you measure that? How do you figure that out? But back to your original question, is go live the end of the journey? The answer to this question would be no, if modern applications were implemented with a set it and forget it mentality, but that would require businesses to stand still, to not grow, or to change or to optimize. But that's not really our reality, is it? In today's world, and particularly with the impacts of our global pandemic, organizations must continuously drive user adoption and efficiencies in their workforce by enhancing their user experience and their business processes. The way to do this is through constant technology updates, which we get from Oracle, and through process automation and process improvement. All the while, you need to establish KPIs and have them in place so you can measure and monitor adoption of the new technologies, the value driven from your business processes and the enhancements that you may make to them, and to identify an empowered workforce. An empowered workforce is really key to getting through and thriving during and post-pandemic. These strategic objectives must be identified and employed on day 2 post-go live, or what you'll see is how on the next slide, without a strategy and the enablers to achieving those objectives, the negative business and user satisfaction outcomes can be devastating to the expected return on the initial technology investments and to the business as a whole. Over to you, Chris. Tell us more about those negative impacts.
Thanks very much for that, Kathy. So looking at some of the challenges that we see our customers experiencing post go live. It's a new system, users aren't familiar with the solution, the organization doesn't have the internal knowledge necessarily that they did from the previous solution. This results in users getting frustrated, it has a negative impact, adoption rates are impacted if users don't know how to use the system or where to get the support they need. And all this ultimately affects the pace at which an organization could, in theory, or potentially modernize with a new system in place, and in turn the speed at which they can achieve the ROI that they'd set out to achieve. Post go live, we often see what we call the go live dip that impacts productivity and performance to a point where you feel it's actually worse using the new system as opposed to the old legacy solution that you had. The good news is that eventually, as knowledge builds again, the performance does improve. Now, we've overlaid months on the graph that you can see in front of you, but this does vary from company to company, so you don't always see a move into the positive within that first year of go live. So it would be easy for me to say, okay, well, work with EvaSys and that go live dip just goes away completely, and we keep you on an exponential performance scale that stays in the positive section of that graph. However, that's just not realistic. Business change is always difficult to embed and implement. And with a new solution, as users get to grips with it, there's always a dip. But what we've seen is that with the right level of support and service, organizations can significantly reduce that dip and move back into the positive performance to not only maximize the ROI that can be achieved, but also supporting realizing it a lot quicker. And this just isn't achieved by having a help desk to call when you're unsure on how a solution works. It needs support in other key areas. So Kathy, can you take us through the typical support model post go live, as well as the importance of aligning a managed service to the ITSM model?
Sure, Chris, I'd be happy to. So Now that an organization is live on the software, there needs to be an established structure for handling user and software issues, addressing enhancement and reporting needs, managing continuous innovation upgrades from Oracle, dealing with MyOracle support on bugs and enhancement requests, and getting to the nice-to-haves that weren't addressed in the implementation itself. Everyone had those, right? Let's just get in what we can. And, at some future phase, we'll get to, some of those enhancements and things that would be nice to have later on. This is the typical IT service management help desk structure. As you know, level 1 support typically serves to get users unstuck in their functionality understanding. It helps to iron out roles and access issues, and then to identify and pass on errors that need to move to level 2 and 3. Most organizations handle this support just fine with a well-prepared process to do so. At level 2, usually there are power users from the implementation that have been identified to handle basic incident and problem management, and they may also be tasked with other projects intended to enhance the business outcomes, all while providing this level 2 or level 3 support. Where it gets tricky is when they don't see what's coming next till it arrives. It's things like users working outside the system because they never really latched on or bought into the changes. Or how about when a new acquisition causes the need to adjust or enhance the solution with little time to respond, all the while being asked to manage quarterly updates from Oracle. These updates need to be examined for a fit to use case, then put through some rigor of regression testing, training, and deployment. Who knows, maybe some of those nice-to-haves can be greatly enhanced by the upgrades from Oracle, but finding adequate time to evaluate them can be problematic. Supporting an ERP system is nothing short of a balancing act, where you need to focus on driving user empowerment, training and adoption, along with implementing business process improvements and increasing overall efficiency. Who even has time to get to automation? Not just for testing, but also to streamline and improve productivity and higher value in day-to-day activities. Many organizations realize how vital balancing all this is, so they choose to outsource some of the more difficult tasks to a third party. Some handle level 1, some handle, a bit of level 2, and then parse out to the rest of those functions to a third-party managed services provider. But often it's with a traditional break fix, let's just keep the lights on approach, which means they're left to managing all the changes brought about upgrades or by their business on their own, where they face less than optimal workforce efficiency and adoption. The sacrifices to the overall objectives we spoke of earlier can be huge. So what is the perfect model for support? My laptop's going a little crazy. All right, sorry about that. So the perfect recipe, I call it, is to have it all. And the first step in that is realizing that you can. Don't choose just keeping the lights on over driving greater value from the system just to get by. Lay out a clear path that enables your objectives for an empowered workforce with high adoption rates and efficient processes. Enable measurement of process value through KPI-driven analytics. Trust me when I say that rarely, and I do mean rarely, does an organization have the resources and bandwidth to do it all. You're not alone in this if this is your situation. So what choice do you have? On this slide, you'll see an approach that takes the typical support model to new levels, wherein there's a structure that enables traditional support functions like break fix and users being stuck, right? Access issues and such, along with value-based analytics to drive continuous improvement and adoption of new functionality and automation to enable the outcomes the organization seeks. It requires some real heavy lifting to drive out of the application the empowerment and improvements your business needs. When you place this level of services in the hands of talented engineers who are trained to work with your business to measure KPIs and drive high value from your business processes, you free up resources to focus on the next thing the business needs to change and to grow. Let's take a pulse to see where you are. Chris, over to you for a poll.
Thanks, Kathy. So what we'd like to do now is just ask you an initial question around your support model that you've currently got in place. So shortly I'll be starting the poll, and there'll be a list of 4 choices. So the four choices are currently on your screen now. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is start this poll. So in front of you now, you should have those, the question I've just read out with the 4 options. I'll just ask you or invite you now to just vote for me, and we'll keep the poll open for 15 to 20 seconds. And thank you everyone that's voted so far. If I could ask those that haven't to just consider which of those is most relevant to them. We'd be interested to know at what stage in that support model each of our guests today is currently at. So a few more seconds. Great. So closing off the poll. Thanks everyone that's voted. I'm going to go ahead and share the results with you. And we can see here that 71% of our guests today, of the attendees, have got a managed service model that's partly carried out internally and partly outsourced, which is really, really interesting. Thank you very much for that.
It actually wasn't a surprise to me, because I was thinking that organizations really are pretty okay with doing the level 1 and some of the level 2, but then, it can be overwhelming to handle, a lot of that heavy lifting. So they do outsource some, but then is it just still break, fix, keep the lights on, or to really, drive continuous improvement and such? So let's talk about that.
Great stuff, Kathy. Well, back over to you. Let's talk about continuous improvement.
There we go. I didn't hyper tap. So in this section, we're going to talk about how we can help you to continuously improve. Just a reminder of the questions, from that original abstract of this webcast that we put out there. Are you meeting and exceeding the ROI you intended? Does your current support model allow you to have help with delivering on your KPIs? So now we'll talk about what our EVASYS approach is to helping you to drive continuous improvement in your applications. There are 2 very key elements to this in our model. One is our value-based analytics, and the second is the Innovations Council. Let's take one more look at the key objectives to minimize the dip that Chris talked about and maximize value realization. The first one is don't just keep the lights on, enable the highest levels of business value, leverage ITIL-based continuous improvement through value-based analytics, drive efficiency and self-sufficiency in your user communities, and establish KPIs to drive factual-based support and innovations. To get the most out of your business systems, you have to move from reactive to proactive. Don't live in the technical weeds. You'll miss out on driving greater value for your business. Take out the guesswork and expect fact-based KPIs that show the health of your user community, their adoption, and the productivity of your business processes. In our managed services model, we bring industry-leading practices with over 340 value-based analytics tools and over 140 established KPIs to get you started on the journey. You can add and revise those as we engage in your managed services journey with you. So let's take a look at the value-based analytics and some sample KPIs. So they're broken down into 4 categories. So let's have a look. First is process optimizations, and then you'll see we focused on areas of GL close cycle time, days payable outstanding, and slow moving stock. And you can see that KPIs were identified and measured through the value-based analytics on the right. In system adoption, some examples are to look at the utilization of the system, data quality, and adoption rates with goals to increase adoption, visibility of reports used, how many reports get built that people never even bother with, and then you're trying to retrofit them in the next upgrade, and you realize if you take a look, they're not even using them. So that's a key measurement of adoption and use of the system. And then overall user performance in areas such as data quality. In this example also, we analyzed information output in payables spend, inventory receipts, procurement spend, and the like, again through KPIs and value-based analytics reporting. And then, of course, KPIs and analytics in audit and compliance are vital to ensure proper segregation of duties and reconciliation of subledgers, account balances, and journals. The key message that's on this slide here is to set your KPIs by no later than day 2 of go live. Again, we have over 140 that you can start from. You can add, you can subtract from them, whatever suits your business. And then measure process value through value-based analytics tools, where we bring 340 of them to your journey with Evosys. Let's check in now with Chris about our innovation board.
Thanks very much, Kathy. So the innovation board that we offer our customers is underpinned by that VBA solution that Kathy has spoken to us about. And the innovation board provides a 6-step cycle to help with defining, validating, and executing the business KPIs that an organization sets out to achieve at the start of their journey. And the important step is to then monitor performance against these KPIs and to test and improve them. And this is a service that we include in our managed service, and we're seeing great returns for our customers. So if we take an example of a customer that began their journey with us in 2017, we can see how they're performing against the 4 KPIs that were important to them at that very start of that journey. Not only do we have to set out what it is that they want to achieve, but also how. So some of it will be down to working together to streamline processes or even automate them. But the constant around all of these KPIs is increasing efficiency and ultimately winning back time. And as we then couple that with working with an organization to remove those inefficiencies, it results in less time being spent on operational issues and inefficiencies, and longer time being spent on continuous improvement. Now, once again, here we're using a live example customer, and streamlining processes and having more self-sufficiency across the workforce was the ultimate aim for them. So, Kathy, should we take another break and go over to a poll?
Yes, let's do that. So get ready. Chris is going to enable the polling function. In the meantime, the question is, do you have defined business outcome KPIs, and do you monitor them?
So the poll is now open. It'd be great for you to vote for us.
I don't know about you, but I can't predict what the leading answer will be.
I've got the benefit of actually seeing the poll live, so I'm cheating. Okay, so I'm just going to keep it open for a few more seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, so closing off the poll and sharing the results. What's your thoughts, Kathy?
Wow. Not quite an even spread. And it's good news that there are more that have KPIs, but it's kind of sad that they don't have the means or aren't baking in a process to monitor them. And congrats to those that have them and monitor them.
Great stuff. So I'm going to close off the poll now so we can go back to our slides. Okay, so now we're going to move on to leveraging innovations and how they, as part of a managed service, can help with the three other questions that we posed earlier. So in this section, what we're looking to do is take from those 5 questions, questions 2, 3, and 4. So are you able to continuously drive user adoption and increase efficiencies through best practices? Do you benefit from a fully automated testing solution for the quarterly updates? Do you have time to assess and deploy these innovations so that your business can benefit through enabling functionalities introduced? Okay, so let's look at how other technologies then can help with not only facilitating the release cycle, but also how they can drive further success from your Oracle applications. So we've leveraged the latest technologies and created a series of packages across 3 distinct areas: robotic process automation, or RPA, analytics, and chatbot. Now, with RPA, and Kathy will be going into a bit more detail shortly, but we look at how we can help our customers automate the regression testing that's carried out for each quarterly cycle to save time and provide focus on where it's required. We also look at how we can save time with automating business processes too. From an analytics perspective, Kathy spoke to us at length about our value-based analytics that can be overlaid onto any existing analytics that you've got in place and provides that rich information around the 4 key areas. So the process optimization, system adoption, information output, and audit and compliance that as I said, Kathy went into detail earlier. But the other point to raise here is that data and analytics shared across the business can lead to much better outcomes. And data is often siloed into each business unit or department in an organization. Now, obviously, there is some data that needs to be kept within departments, but have a think about whether having a more holistic view of data from across the organization would help you. And perhaps those non-Oracle solutions that you may have running within the business. You know, we can talk about how Oracle Cloud Analytics can, and the wider range of technical solutions can help from technology perspective, but also bring together how Evasys can help in getting the data into Oracle, as well as how you can get the most out of that data as well. What's this got to do with managed service, you probably ask? Well, ultimately, it's about utilizing this time that's available to adopting a managed service and benefiting from all those efficiencies that we've discussed today so far, to look at how analytics can really drive you forward. And it's probably something, when it comes to analytics, it's probably something that always remains on the back burner through the lack of time. And then finally, chatbots and digital assistants. Many of us are used to dealing with these solutions in our personal lives already, and particularly when we're looking for help from online retailers all the way through to utility providers. They can be frustrating at times, but it's fair to say that they've come a long way in the last few years in providing positive outcomes, without the need of endlessly waiting on the phone for a customer service agent to pick up the phone, for example. And we are seeing more and more how businesses want to use these internally too. And some of you may already actually actively be using digital assistants within your organization, but they play a pivotal role in helping to improve system adoption through an improved user experience. We spoke about value-based analytics earlier around identifying areas where we need to improve system adoption, and digital assistance plays a key area in that. And whilst HCM seems to be a popular area to deploy them for internal purposes, they can be used in almost any department and are often seen as a really inexpensive quick win with a great return on investment. So I'm going to hand back over to Kathy now, who's going to spend a bit more time talking to us about RPA and its use in regression testing, as well as business process automation, before I then look at chatbots and digital assistants. Over to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Chris. And there it goes. So here's a typical roadmap for the upgrade process, which includes system readiness checks, release updates, review of new features, impact analysis of new features, and identification of new functionality to deploy, hopefully to deploy. The process is filled with a lot of documentation, technical steps and staging, and then there's the preparation of test scripts, actually executing regression testing, issues resolution from testing, and eventually some setup changes once the issues are resolved. Once everything's signed off and the user community is trained and prepared for the changing functions that are deployed to production, we hit go and we're live. Does anyone really have the ideal time to do this from end to end? Or do we just do what's needed to get by, such as, oh, let's do some regression testing, make some setup changes, test and deploy? Are we sacrificing improvements and new functionality because of time and resource constraints? Would you agree that automating the entire testing phase would add significant time to the upgrade process, time to really evaluate how the business can benefit from new features and actually deploy them? Let's take a look. Let's simulate that. So here's that upgrade process again, and this is leveraging robotic process automation. Look at the line to the right of number 7. You get all that time back, and I'll go into some statistics here in a second, when you automate the process. So in our managed services model, we leverage robotic process automation, or RPAs, for the entire regression testing cycle. The scripts and their execution are completely automated. Look how much time you get back to check out improvements brought about by the upgrade. Now you have time to continue to increase your ROI on your Oracle applications by leveraging new features in production. Think about some of those nice to haves. Maybe they came in a quarterly update, or they're enabled, or they're, you know, a lot more optimized. But it doesn't end there. There are 2 parts to the automation process. From a regression testing perspective, when we looked at the time savings our managed services customers gained by automating the upgrade from 20C to 20D, we saw a savings of 60% from the previous 20B to 20C. We continually build out the test scripts for the standard Oracle processes and now have over 400, and it's still growing the number of pre-built processes we employ. However, we recognize that most organizations have some level of customizations in their processes, so we work with them to build the scripts in readiness for the upgrade. Once they're built, they can be continually used for each upgrade cycle, but like I said, it doesn't end there. The other part is business process automation. This is where the larger savings can be realized. We spoke earlier about how our value-based analytics solutions can be used to help identify the business processes that are ideal candidates for automation. Once those processes have been identified, we recommend investing time up front to standardize or even redesign the process before you automate them. I'll tell you more about that. Forrester wrote an interesting paper in May 2020 talking about the importance of RPA in the modern world, and interestingly, how much of a role it will play in the post-pandemic world. It is a #1 tool to recovery and resilience post-pandemic. They included some golden rules for RPA, and they said that it's vitally important to carry out the standardization process rewrite steps, even if it increases the initial cost. This is because ultimately it'll lead to a more sustainable automation with improved returns. They also went on to say how important it is to have a well-documented process map. Automation is normally a fragment of a wider process, so you need to ensure that automation factors in dependencies if associated with the wider process. The other interesting point that the report made was that humans still find more improved ways of getting a job done by using different tools, or maybe even identifying shortcuts. That's why it's better to look at simplifying and standardizing processes first, if they can be. Now let's talk about some of the benefits to automating processes. Once you've automated a process, it's available 24/7. So if you have an Excel file with 2,000 journals that you need to enter, this can be run overnight using RPA. Because of this, it makes RPA an efficient tool for getting work done. The other benefit is the speed at which things are completed. Not only can processes be carried out 4 to 5 times faster than humans, process automation doesn't have the distractions that we all experience from being interrupted by text messages, phone calls, or someone popping over to our desk to ask you a question. Although given the current restrictions most of us are under, I'd welcome being in an office with colleagues interrupting me rather than my dog Audrey, who needs my constant love and attention all day long. There are also assurances over the level of accuracy. Give a robot a task and it will deliver it consistently. Then the final point is focus. Many processes that are automated revolve around data entry. If we take these processes away from employees, it allows them to focus on the value-add activities, increasing employee engagement as a result. Higher engaged employees make better business outcomes. So let's take a poll on your regression process, regression testing. So Chris, will you, there goes the poll.
Bear with me. I'm just going to go ahead and launch the poll now, Kathy.
Yes, thank you. So approximately how many hours of regression testing per quarter do you carry out for each of your Oracle upgrade across the entire business? Each quarterly upgrade, how much time on average do you think you spend?
Whilst we're waiting, Kathy, you're going to take a guess on what the results are going to be?
Yeah, I was thinking that I wonder how many just take a blind leap of faith and don't get to do a deep level of regression testing because they just don't have the time. So it'll be interesting to see how many pop into that low number range. And then, of course, you know, you look at industries like life sciences, right, where you have to do an immense amount of testing, you know, to hit all the requirements of 21 CFR 11 and such. They're probably in the over 30, I would think, in those industries.
I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to share the results now. How about that?
I guess a lot of it's dependent on, you know, how much you have deployed as well, right? So manufacturing and supply chain processes are a lot more cumbersome than if you just have the HCM, or it's a pretty subjective question.
Good stuff. Should we move on?
Take it away.
Okay. So looking at digital assistants now. So the 4 main benefits when you look at digital assistants, they're summarized on the screen now. But all in all, the use of digital assistant underpins the success of improving system adoption, and it improves the overall experience of interacting with the system, normally by simplifying the process. And when coupled with RPA that we heard Kathy talk about, it can go a long way to automating some of the repetitive tasks that users often have to perform. And given how inexpensive they are to create and integrate with existing solutions, they really are a big quick win for many organizations. And here are some examples of applications that in turn have processes that digital assistants can help along with the familiar social channels that are used across business by users. Some of them, such as WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, are also used on outside of work by many of us, and the channels that, by that very nature, means that we're very familiar with using them. So latching onto this type of platform that employees are confident in using can again be really beneficial in helping with system adoption. And then finally, because I'm conscious of time, to summarize and expand on the areas that EvaSys cover that can be included in a managed service, I guess it's really important to build a service that is fit for each organization. So whether it's a digital assistant, automating process that extends to the use of AI and machine learning, or whether it's getting more from the data that exists within an organization, the use of this type of technology is pivotal to the role of a managed service, and moving it from being a ticket focus to providing value and giving organizations that for that vital time needed to look at ways to innovate, improve, and ultimately deliver on the desired business outcomes. So just closing up now, but bring this to an end, I just wanted to spend just a few more, or just a minute or so, Kathy, just looking at some of the questions that we may have had before we let our attendees go and enjoy the rest of their day.
Mm-hmm.
I do see some questions coming in, so I'm just going to pick out a few of them. And apologies for those of you that ask questions that we don't come back to you straight away on this webinar. So just this first one here, Kathy, some really interesting things have been discussed. Do you need to sign up to a managed service to benefit from some of those things? I'm assuming that we're talking about the RPA and the digital assistants. Do you want to answer that, Kathy, or do you want me to?
I can take it. Yeah, sure. So, well, certainly during our implementations, I can tell you we leveraged the examples that you gave. And then, of course, we showed it as our overall next generation managed services portfolio. But yes, you can leverage some of them, as far as implementing chatbots and digital assistants and things like that. Of course, I'm going to say that to get the most value from the applications, drive continuous improvement, right? Have the time to look at new features and the upgrades and things. Taking, the full service offering would be the greatest benefit. But we can certainly look at what your individual interests are and see how we can help out with those.
And we'll take one final question, Kathy. Let me just pick one. So, do you have a standard managed service, or can it be tailored? Would you like me to take that one, Kathy?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, the simple answer to that is that it's each managed service is tailored to meet a customer's requirements. I mean, we don't believe in having a standard managed service where you've got features within that managed service that you don't benefit from. So what we'll do, and in fact, I'm going to bring in another question here where someone's asking how much it costs. What we like to do is we like to do an analysis of where you are in that journey. Earlier, we saw in the poll questions that many of you have got an element of internal managed service or an internal support service, and then you've got an external provider. And what we like to do is we like to review where you are and just fill in those gaps. What is it that we can actually do to enhance that service that you've currently got there? So the short answer is we absolutely do tailor the managed service to suit your requirements. So thank you very much to everyone who's asked questions today and that's participated in the polls. We do have one final poll before we let you all go. The poll itself, so the question may be a little bit misleading, but what we're looking for is we want to do a series of these webinars, and we'd like our next webinar to talk about things to consider when either moving from an internal managed service provision or support provision, or moving from an existing provider to a new managed service. And it's something that we'd like to cover in the next webinar. So wouldn't mind just asking you to answer that question as to yes, no, and it's something that we'd look to do in the next couple of months. So if I could ask you to just vote on what your thoughts are on that. What do you think, Kathy? What do you think the answer is going to be that everyone wants to hear us again?
Well, I hope that the answer is yes, and it's because we gave folks something to think about, right? About how they could leverage and change up their services to get more out of their investment in Oracle applications.
So I'm going to close off the poll in 3, 2, 1. So I'll share the results.
Nice, very good.
Looks like we need to get planning.
Time well spent, yes. Okay.
Once again, thank you everyone for your time today and for joining us on this webinar, and apologies that we've slightly overrun. Kathy, do you have any final words to say?
No, just thank you so much for your time, everyone, and look forward to seeing you on the next webcast.
We hope you all have a very good rest of your day. Take care.